Hey y'all, Father Jabril here. And before we get started with this week's episode, I just wanted to drop in a few moments, share some words with you because I really want to get to know you better, build a relationship with you. So would you text Blacks with Power to 44222? Blacks with Power to 44222, or visit blackswithpower.com/Facebook and join our Facebook group. A few questions there to help me understand how this content can best serve you, how this Blacks with Power movement can best help you to harness the power that you have to leverage it for yourself in order to make your family great again, to make America great again, because indeed Blacks with Power is what I believe will make America great again. And so would love to learn from you, hear from you, share with you. If you text Blacks with Power to 44222 or visit facebook.com/Blacks with Power, I'd really appreciate it because I definitely want to hear from you after you hear from our guest for today. So enjoy the show today with attorney Lee Merritt. Peace. All right, y'all, welcome to Blacks with Power, the show for Blacks in America who want to discover ways to harness their power in order to protect the gains won by the struggles of our ancestors and advance the cause of freedom for themselves, their family, and for others. We believe that for America to be great, for America to be the more perfect union that our Constitution calls for us to be, then we must have racial reconciliation in this country. And for there to be true reconciliation, Blacks in America must empower themselves to compel and encourage repentance for the system and ideology of white supremacy and privilege that has betrayed the ideal of liberty and justice for all. I'm Father Jabril Ballantine, and I will be your guide on this journey toward the America that can and should be. Thank you all so much for listening. You can visit us online at blackswithpower.com. Please be sure to like the Facebook page, facebook.com/blackswithpower, and join in on the discussion. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, or YouTube. Listen to the previous episodes and leave a review. Give us a thumbs up, a thumbs down. Let us know what you like, what you dislike. And share the episodes with your family, with your friends, because all voices are needed, brothers and sisters. And so we have a lot to discuss, so I want to jump into it with you. I am sitting with a man that is no stranger to you all. You all have all known of him, all heard of him by now. If you don't, then you're probably under a rock. Attorney Lee Merritt is a social justice activist and attorney who is emerging as an influential new voice in the fight for civil rights throughout the country by bringing a passion for social reform and a commitment to speaking out on inequities while practicing law. Attorney Merritt leads a high-profile practice of clients involved in international events, including the tragic Dallas sniper attacks on July 7, 2016, corporate discrimination cases, viral police brutality matters, and several other cases that have been associated with the Black Lives Matter movement. Most recently, the case of Marlin Gipson, the young man who was accosted and manhandled, the college student who had the dogs let out on him because he did not obey his overseers. Y'all remember KRS-One talking about officers or overseers. He did not obey his overseers, and so they let the dogs out on him. Attorney Merritt, how are you, brother?
Hey, I'm a little tired. I just got off a plane, just got back to Dallas from Houston, but I'm encouraged.
Amen, amen. What they say, no rest for the weary, my brother. And so I'm glad that you are out there doing what you're doing. We should all be thankful that you're doing what you're doing. May the Lord give you strength and courage to always continue. I appreciate you being with us, man. One thing I wanted to just get into, I thought was pretty interesting by looking at your bio. It says that you're a spoken word artist. So, I myself, I put together a spoken word album myself of gospel poetry based on the gospel. Tell us about your poetry, though.
Yeah, I always tell people that's my little white lie. I don't do spoken word at all. I do hip hop. I came up as a kid. I was a rapper. But when you grow up and you're professional, you can't really be like, I'm a rapper, right?
Right.
So you gotta say, you gotta call it spoken word. So yeah, I still dabble a little bit in hip hop and under the guise of spoken word.
Okay. Oh man, that's beautiful, man. I used to be a college radio DJ when I was at University of Delaware. I had an underground hip hop show. Thought I was gonna be a rapper too. I was making communications with common sense. Had this track that I had previewed. I used to love her 2000, just in time for the millennium. I thought I was gonna make my way, but yeah, like you said, we got to grow up and we got to become poets.
Right.
So, Another thing that I thought was interesting, and I'd love to unpack with you, is that early in your career you worked at the Cochran Firm. So now, were you at the Cochran Firm when Johnny was alive?
No, Johnny had passed before I graduated law school.
Okay, okay. The reason I was asking is because of your work now being so much towards social justice, and a lot of people don't know about Johnny Cochran. Is his commitment to social justice. We know about the OJ trial and that high profile case, but we don't know all the work that he did for political prisoners, getting Geronimo Pratt out of prison, and countless other things that he did. And I was wondering if there was anything about the Cochran Firm that kind of shaped your view of the practice of law and how that happened.
Well, I was raised in South Central Los Angeles, so I grew up under the long shadow of Johnny Cochran, from his work fighting against police brutality before the OJ trial. His whole career was about addressing police reform in my neighborhood, and so I grew up admiring him. I grew up. He was, that's the poster I put on my wall when people were putting up Tupac.
Nice.
And so it was an extreme esteemed honor to be able to work for his law firm, being my first job out of law school. But it turned out that his firm grew so much across the nation that the character of Johnny Cochran, the passion of the Cochran Firm in Philadelphia, which is where I was, it wasn't the same. It wasn't.
Okay.
The firm itself didn't have the same aspirations. They were, more or less a corporate firm who was mostly concerned about bottom line, and obtaining great results for their clients and with a bunch of talented lawyers. But they weren't interested in changing or reshaping the culture or anything like that. So that's why I started my own practice.
Okay, yeah. So that's what compelled you to leave, and I know you, and of course, Jordan Edwards is the parents of Jordan Edwards, the family of Jordan Edwards, another one of your clients. Jacqueline Craig, the family, another one of your clients. Jordan Edwards, y'all may not remember, there's so many of these cases that happen. You may get lost in translation, which one is which, right? Jordan Edwards is the one who the officer shot into a car full of teens, killing Jordan, and then Jacqueline Craig was the mother that was manhandled by police for calling them and told by the police basically that she should be appreciative of the white man who took up his white man's burden to civilize her Negro child. But I also note that you're admitted to the federal bar. I wonder why not the Supreme Court as well. But this is part of the question. So in the way that you approach your work and the mission and service that you have, why not the Supreme Court as well? And do you think that's going to ultimately become part of your work, and why that would be important? But is there a Black Lives Matter legal defense fund? Is there a need for some? What should we be doing as those of us who are not lawyers to support folk like yourself?
So the reason I practice at the federal level, at the trial level, is because I'm a trial lawyer. I'm coming into my fifth year of practice. I'm not a seasoned attorney. I've had some great experiences. I've had some great training, but I'm cutting my teeth at the trial level, and that's where cases are initially heard, particularly in the federal courts that address issues of constitutionality. And so when you get up to the Supreme Court, you're talking about at the appellate level. I mean, there's been a decision in a case that either some evidence can come in, or that a specific jury instruction was appropriate or not appropriate. And in order to change that, a lawyer will appeal or refer to what we call appellate attorneys, people who just generally write briefs and try to submit them to the court. I haven't done that yet. I do plan to add that to the repertoire, but I'm enjoying being a trial lawyer and learning from some great attorneys who are mentoring me. And doing the work that I do.
Okay. So now, in terms of, I know Black Lives Matter is a little more, fluid. It's not an entity per se.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it doesn't. I don't know if it has like a legal defense fund, or if we have a legal defense fund mechanism, and if and why that would be important for the work that you do.
So we don't. So there's the Black Lives Matter organization, and then there's the Black Lives Matter movement. The movement is people like yourself, radio hosts, attorneys, teachers who say, you know what, Black Lives Matter to me, and I'm going to use my profession to promote that dialogue. And but as attorneys, I've attempted at least on one occasion to start a fund that would allow me to better represent clients, to provide for needs for clients, to bail out people who are improperly incarcerated, et cetera. And the first thing that we hear is that he's out there for the money. I knew it the entire time. So it's difficult. It's
Right, right. So
yeah.
let's demystify that, because I know that argument always comes up, right? I definitely know that. But and people always want to say, but I understand. We have people like, I mean, I hate to say it, but we have people like Al Sharpton and Jesse and them who they're like make careers out of this.
Yeah.
And it kind of sullies the need for the resources and muddies the understanding of why we need those resources. But so let's unpack it. Why would a legal defense fund be helpful and be necessary to fight these fights?
So we're dealing with the case of Pedro Fernandez, and I want to make sure I'm saying his name right. Is it Pedro Fernandez? Yeah, so it was Pedro Fernandez out of New York, and he was wrongfully incarcerated on trumped-up charges by an officer who was later suspended and investigated himself. He was accused of shooting into a crowd, and the person that he was accused of shooting after shooting into a crowd said, "I know that it was not him." All the witnesses came forward and said the only reason that we testified it was him is the officer threatened us and told us we had to testify.
Oh wow, right.
But he was still being held on a $250,000 cash fine. He would not be allowed to pay 10% of it, but he had to pay the entire amount. And so myself, Sean King, a lot of local activist organizations, private donors got the $250,000 together, and he's going to be released today.
Amen. Thanks be to God.
But he's been sitting there for a week. And he's been sitting there for, a lot longer than a week. But since we started organizing around this, he was sitting there for a week. And since Sean King first wrote about it, he was sitting there. And when your name gets popular, when you're in jail, you become a target. And so we had to spend that time to raise this money and reach out to all over the country. And people, the community poured in support. And at the entire time, he was at risk. If we had a treasure chest, a war chest of money set aside in the first place, we would reach into it, we would pay it off, and we would keep it moving. That's just one example. But for bails, for bonds, to hire proper investigators, to do basic, what we call e-discovery or computer discovery is a very expensive process. But for cases like the one I'm dealing with in Houston, if these officers were recommended, say, via email, and they shot one email to another, and then they heard about our pending lawsuit and said, hey, delete all those emails. Mm-hmm. Well, we want to go and e-discover them, and that process is expensive. You want the money available to be able to do things like that.
Yeah. It's to be preemptive, to be proactive and preemptive in how we approach these things, because these matters are so fluid that we have to be able to act quickly. And it's better to have the money. And thanks be to God, I mean, Sean's got a powerful vehicle, right? So he was able to put out the word and raise that money. But it still is longer time than we already got a treasure chest, war chest of money sitting there.
And I do want to emphasize, because it was a concerted effort among a lot of people who were working to get Pedro free. And so Sean contributed a great deal towards the publicity, but there was a private donor who himself, I think, donated the entire amount.
Oh, wow.
In addition to, I think, over $100,000 that Sean raised, and there's other groups who were active in recruiting that private donor. I'm just not recalling their names right now. So
right. But yeah, it's
Sean
very important.
Always does his thing, but it takes a village.
Yeah. It's very important to have that, especially when, and this is why I really want you to unpack, right? Especially when we're dealing with this thing that you call colored people justice, right? We got to have the resources to be able to fight the fights that, when you're dealing with colored people justice. So, how would you describe what colored people justice is? I mean, I heard you talk about it on a couple interviews, but how would you describe what colored people justice is? And then, what is the single most important obstacle that you see to dismantling, overcoming colored people justice?
Right. So colored people justice is a way of describing white supremacy and white privilege as it relates to the judicial system. But what we were called in the 1960s and the 1950s, there were colored water fountains. There were segregated lunch counters, and they would hang signs from them that says either coloreds only or whites only.
Right.
And while all those signs have been torn down, we still have a judicial system, I believe, that offers colored people's justice and white people's justice, right? And so you take people who have committed the exact same crime. I can imagine there was a case actually out of Texas where a bunch of white students targeted a young black boy, a mentally disabled black boy. They raped him with a coat hanger. He was on their football team, and beat him up and humiliated him. Those group of young white boys were never charged with a crime, well, never charged with sexual assault, never faced a day in jail. They were charged with something like horseplay. The people covered them up to say that these were just good kids who were doing stupid things on a football team. And
kind of
then
like that lacrosse incident.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And then there was an extreme case of black kids who I think targeted a mentally disabled Trump supporter in Chicago, I believe. And same thing, they made him drink toilet water, did some really terrible, brutal things to him. They were arrested, and they were all charged with crimes, and the prosecutor promised to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. They were held over with no bond, and they got colored people's justice. When black people step out of line or accused of stepping out of line, the justice system turns on its head to ensure that they are properly punished. I think what we're seeing in the case of the young white woman, I can't recall her name.
I can't remember her name, but I know the woman from Australia.
Yeah, the young lady from Australia. Well, she suffered the same police brutality that we have been suffering in this country for time insurmountable. And, people saw that case, and I think her lawyer called it the worst case of injustice he'd had ever. The worst. He called her the most innocent victim of police brutality he's ever seen. The police chief went on TV to declare that did not have to happen, that she would get justice, and it was not in conformity with their training and what they believed was right. She made it clear that she was throwing her officer under the bus, something you rarely see from a police chief. But that woman was getting white people's justice, whereas Jordan Edwards, immediately after he was killed, the police chief went on TV and said the car was probably backing up violently towards an officer, and it represented a clear danger.
There's always some sort of justification. There's always some sort of reasoning. Yeah.
Right. And even after they saw the video, he said, well, we made a mistake about that. But recently they started calling him gang affiliated and making versions that there was a gun found in the car. This is one, for me, probably one of the most innocent victims of police brutality I've ever seen.
Right. Honest student, making good in the community and everything else.
But he
somehow.
Right.
Right. And that becomes the thing, when you look at that woman as for instance, being shot by the police, the helpless position, I guess speaking for myself, the helpless position as a black person under colored people's justice is that position that says the only thing that's going to change this is when it starts happening to enough white folks, and you don't want to be in that position, because, all lives do matter. Right. But it's like the only time they hear us about how our life isn't mattering is when it starts happening to them. You see it with heroin, and heroin is a criminal thing back in crack and heroin is a criminal thing back in the 80s and in the 90s, but now it's an epidemic that we need to tend to and treat with responsibility and not criminalize these people. And so you see these examples of colored people justice and white folks justice. I mean, big example of white folks justice is Dylan Roof killing 9 people in a church in South Carolina and getting taken to Burger King. Like, can you imagine being a black person wouldn't have been alive, let alone get some fast food, You know,
Uh, and
so,
I,
but
I've
not
been
from that.
focusing on that recently, where you see these high-profile shootings of cops performed primarily by white men, and they're all taken into custody, taken alive.
Right.
But when a black man, like we saw recently in New York, kills a police officer, no one's released the autopsy report for that young man. But I can imagine this mentally ill person who took the life of Officer Familia was shot several times in the back because they said he was running away when they shot him,
Right.
uh, and he was executed. And people said that's okay because he was getting colored
Right.
people's justice
Right. Just like it was okay for the Dallas, the sniper, to be
to
blown
be
up.
blown up. Yeah.
Like, really? I mean,
Justice is swift, it's immediate, it's severe.
right.
And it doesn't, you don't need the rule of law for colored people to get justice in our country.
So the hopeless position, like I said, when I speak for myself, right? The hopeless position is to say, Lord, we need a little more white people to feel this so that we can understand. What's the what's the proactive, what's the empowered perspective? Like what do you think needs to happen? What would have to happen, let's say over the course of your legal career as you're a contributor to these solutions? What would have to happen for us as a people to take matters into our own hands to overcome, dismantle colored people's justice?
Well, part of it is building bridges, specifically with regard to policing. The truth is, police brutality, while there is targeting of African Americans and excess of force against African Americans, uh, the policing culture in America is just problematic. Period. We shoot way too many of our citizens. We kill way too many of our citizens, more than any other modern country on planet Earth. And so you're not wrong. It's not even desperate to say, well, maybe if we start pointing to when they're doing this to them, we can make allies with their communities as well. People who can say from a common sense perspective, hey, why are we killing so many citizens a year, black or white? But in addition to that, I think there's exposure um, means something. And so we're just stepping into a generation over the past decade that is carrying cameras everywhere that they go. And so you see this culture of we saw people riot and stand up in L.A. during Rodney King because somebody happened to be carrying around a big camcorder.
Like who was carrying that around, right?
Right. And, I think they were shooting it from their nearby home. But now we don't need those big camcorders. We all can
Right.
see it, and it's causing communities to be born. It's causing organizations to spring up. It's causing laws to change. It's resulting in more indictments. And so we're nicking at a piece of the system. I think if we begin to understand the system better, people say the judicial system is broken, and it's not broken. It's operating exactly how it was designed to
Right.
operate.
Right.
And so if we can figure out how to change its operation, in other words, the first thing that we see when an officer is involved in a shooting is the first place it should go is the grand jury, right? After an investigation. That's actually another story, but it goes to the grand jury. Grand jurors are trained to hear police cases. There's a regular grand jury, and then there's a grand jury whose police case qualified. And by trained, they're taught that officers are special, that they can't be held as accountable as regular citizens. They go on ride-alongs. They hear from experts who say, when an officer's in the stress of a situation, he may not look at things as logically as the normal human being. He's in
Which is a
fearful of his life.
ridiculous excuse,
Yeah.
if you ask me. I mean, could you imagine if we accepted firefighters that were afraid of a
Right.
fire? Like,
Right.
don't get me wrong, you're going to be afraid because you're going into a fire. But I remember when I report for jury duty as a priest, right? And they asked me, can I take the word of an officer? I was like, no. I mean, imagine me as a priest, as a clergy person. I'm held at a different standard. Joe Smith might cheat on his wife, and it's bad, but it ain't ground shaking. It ain't breaking news. If I do something on my wife, that's
Right.
breaking news. A police officer, in my mind, you have a greater responsibility. You don't get to be as scared as I do. You know, if I'm walking down the street, I'm not a police officer. If I'm walking down the street in a dark alley and somebody flinch, I should be able to pop off and hit them with a bottle or something. You know, I'm scared for my life. But if you're a trained law enforcement, something is wrong with policing in America, is it not? If we're comfortable with law enforcement professionals who are supposed to protect and serve that are so scared that they're gonna kill somebody.
Right, right. But our system is designed to give them excuses. And to be clear, it doesn't always work that way. So the Blue Lives Matter rhetoric is a dog whistle for White Lives Matter, because when the blue life happens to have black skin, the
Right.
system changes completely.
Like the officer who shot the white woman, you know,
right,
from the
exactly.
Australian woman. You know, he's got 2 strikes. He's got black skin and a Somali name, and he's Somali. You know,
right.
so he can forget it.
And of course, they've highlighted in a way that I've never seen before his faith. So he's black skin, he's Somali, and he is a Muslim.
Right.
You know, I've never seen anyone say the white Christian cop who killed this young unarmed black child. Like, I've never seen that. But they are highlighting his religion in the media in this case. So, yeah, changing the grand jury system, changing the jury instructions. I think we need to change in order to allow for colored people, the system of colored people justice to be diminished. We need to change who's actually prosecuting these cases. Prosecutor's office has a unique relationship, and only the judicial system and law enforcement, but has a unique relationship with law enforcement. They rely on law enforcement to get their job done. If you want to be a good prosecutor, you form a great relationship with law enforcement officers. You coordinate investigations and you present your case. Well, then how can we rely on these same prosecutors to then go after these officers when they commit crimes?
Exactly.
And I think that's the reason we're not seeing them indicted. And when they are indicted, I think that's a major reason we're not seeing them convicted. Not to mention that prosecutors, and no offense to all the prosecutors who may be listening, typically aren't that good. They're just not good at their job. Prosecutors is a place that young lawyers, the prosecutor's office is typically a place that young lawyers go to train. And when they get good, they start their own firms to become great defense attorneys and beat up on other young prosecutors.
Right. That is the cycle. Either the prosecutor's office or the public defender's office, the PD's office, same deal. You know, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get people. You get a few that end up staying there, being committed. You know, my mom became an attorney general of Virgin Islands. So, you know, yeah, you do get a few that pass through the ranks. But, yeah, by and large, like you said, you know, it's a place where you go and train and you're not ready to handle those kinds of conditions. So the question becomes then, you know, for our listeners out there, you know, having a chance to really listen to the way that you think and what you want to see as you fight the daily fights, like the grand vision. How do you envision our listeners being effective aids to what, in theory, what you do?
I know some of it sounds rhetorical and some of it sounds redundant, but registering to vote is probably one of the most powerful things that you can do for the judicial system itself.
Okay,
because
why is that?
When you register to vote, you become a lot more likely to be selected for a jury or to get a jury summons. If you show up for the jury summons, then we have an opportunity at least to present cases to a jury of our peers. And so a lot of you have sat at home and said, I don't know how the jury in Philando Castile's case or how the juror in the Crutcher's case came back with what they came back with. Well, it's because that liberal-minded, progressive-minded individuals weren't on the grand jury, but registered conservative voters are on the jury who believe everything that law enforcement officers say and think it's logical to be in fear for your life when you're facing a suspect who is unarmed and fully compliant. And so people need to get re-engaged in the system, and that's both in terms of voting. That's both in terms of showing up for the jury and not looking for a quick, convenient excuse to be dismissed and sent home. Every case is not going to be a high-profile case, but someone is going to need you to be present, and it may not be something you can post about on social media, but it's going to be important for that individual. It's going to be important for those attorneys. The other part is just what they say, staying woke. So as you hear about these things, if people express concern about them, if they show up in your local communities, and you demand transparency, you demand justice, you demand to change the law so that we have access to body cam and dash cam footage, which is often obscure. The reason that those laws, those common sense laws, aren't changing, is because people aren't demanding it. And so if the people and it's really sort of common sense stuff. Anytime that you and I are involved in an altercation with police, we're going to be drug tested. Officers can kill several people and not be drug tested afterwards. They're just not. That doesn't make any sense for them not to be. Because when we ask, like, why was the officer who killed Philando Castile so shaky and jittery and jumpy? It could be that he was under the influence of some sort of narcotic.
It could be.
And oftentimes is. In fact, next to lawyers, I think law enforcement officers is one of the most highly substance abuse professions out there. And I say next to lawyers, so maybe we should be drug tested too. It's if people stay engaged and become involved in the system, some of these real practical changes can take place that would make our jobs easier.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. I think it behooves us, those of you, especially those of you on college campuses, to engage in debate around jury duty. Okay, just because you register to vote doesn't mean you're going to be called up for a jury. And especially those of you who are in college, you probably registered to vote at home. And so they're not going to have you serve jury duty in your college community or whatever. So it might seem like, I hear Lee, but I don't need to do anything about that. But you can hold activities and forums that engage. A lot of our organizations do voter registration drives. But how often do we do jury preparation drives or, events around jury duty and the importance of being on jury duty as a service towards Black Lives Matter, making sure that we have enough of our voices there at the table to make sure that we have a jury of our peers, quote unquote. So I think that is a very important position to have. I would love to hear, maybe there's some connectivity between what you're doing at the national level and how these things are being formed on the ground between yourself and the networks that you have.
Right. The other one real sort of basic aspect of it, and I can probably rattle off a few, but the other aspect of it is we need to report when we are profiled. Even if we don't know even if we're like, I feel like I was profiled, you need to report it because and most of the time nothing will come of it. But if one officer has 3 reports of people who felt profiled by him, now it becomes a pattern. Right. I, as a lawyer, when I can look back at his file, I see it. The fact is that 3% of law enforcement encounters result in some sort of negative reporting. That's a 97% approval rating for law enforcement officers across the country.
And that's how you get that lie about 99.9% of law enforcement officers are doing a good job.
Exactly. And when I met this kid out in Houston, Mr. Gipson, this incident happened on the 18th. Today's the 27th. And I came to him yesterday and I said, "Did you file a complaint?" He said, "No." Right? He wasn't happy with his treatment, but he didn't file a complaint. And most times we don't. And because of, number one, because of the futility of it, let me go to the master and say, "Excuse me, master.
I want to tell you that your overseer beat me."
It was really disrespectful to me. And they're like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." We had an incident in Dallas on Easter Sunday this year, where a young lady rear-ended a car.
Okay.
And a police officer hopped out of it. He was a plainclothes police officer. He pulled out his gun, and he told her, "Let me see your license and registration insurance." She's like, "Can you put the gun away?" She didn't even know he was an officer. "Can you put the gun away?"
Right.
He used some profanity. Told her to do what he told her to do. So she called the cops. The cops came. Dallas Police Department came. He then quickly clipped a badge to his belt. And he said, "Oh, it looked like she was about to try to run." Right. And she wanted to file a complaint against that officer, but the Dallas Police Department interfered and didn't give her the proper information. And she didn't really follow up on it. Well, 2 weeks later, that officer killed Jordan Edwards. It was an officer.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I think about that myself. Like, I'd love to know if you have any sort of resource for walking through that complaint process, filing that complaint process, because I know for myself as a black man, I've been arrested multiple times. We could have a whole show about the number of times I've been arrested and spent nights in jail and come out on the other side, no paper, you know. That, for those of y'all who haven't been arrested, no paper means no charges filed. Right. And so just being so glad, so grateful to be done with it. I never filed any complaints myself against the officers, right? So I imagine there's a lot of that going on as well. So then, you know, you're just grateful you got off, you're glad it's over, and then the process, you don't even know how to do the process. Do you know of any way that, or any resource that guides people through that process?
I know that the Black Lives Matter group offers it on their website. I know that there's a 9-point plan in most organizations across the country. I and Sean King are working on an organization that we're launching next week called Woke Folks. And part of that will be judicial training or legal training for individuals to bring claims on their own behalf, the smaller claims that honestly I would be too busy to bring, right, and to file complaints on their own behalf. So stay tuned. Follow me on Twitter. Follow Sean King, join the group Woke Folks, and that will be a resource available.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, Woke Folks, is the URL up yet?
I don't think so. I really don't know.
Okay, but so how can people connect with Woke Folks now?
It's on Facebook. If you look up
on Facebook,
just follow the group, and then it's a blacked out page right now. But come August 2nd, we'll launch the page.
Wonderful, wonderful. So y'all will put that link in the post as well, so that you can hop over to the Woke Folk Facebook group, and because it's definitely important. That's a powerful resource to know how to actually do that process, because, you know, like, I hear it all the time, and I've always hated that whole 99.9% of police are doing a good job. Like, no, they're not, you know. But one of the reasons people can get away with that lie is because not enough of us, myself included, have reported when officially reported. Because even now, as I have a little clout or whatever, I'll call up the sheriff directly and speak to the sheriff about one of his officers. But that's giving them the courtesy of an off the books report. Right. You know, and not an on the books report. So it's going to be really powerful when y'all release that on walking folks through that. So Woke Folks, we're going to post a link to that. Lee, I appreciate you, brother, for taking your time and talking through these things and highlighting for us what is colored people's justice and some of the things that we can do for combating colored people's justice. Is there any final words that you want to say to folks?
I know that a lot of people are becoming disheartened with the entire system. And I've said before that people respond really one of two ways. They can say, you know, I watched Philando Castile happen. I watched Terrence Crutcher. I watched all these cases happen, and eventually these people get let off. The system won't change. You know, I throw my hands up in the air, and they begin to malign the activity of people who are remaining conscious, who are actively trying to change our culture. Unfortunately, justice in America operates more like a ship than a speedboat. So a speedboat can make quick turns, you know, right. But a ship, you just got to keep turning the wheel, and you have to stay diligent at it, and you have to stay focused on it. And so I just encourage everybody to do whatever you can. In fact, I wrote a song about it. Like to hear it. Here we go.
Here we go.
I hope to speak truth to power. Would use these vows to form words that loom and tower. We loot, devour, because the youth that they shoot is ours. Another body in the street. The strange fruit is sour. We hoot and howl. Hashtag the bitter truth is foul. How will they try to label me if they shoot me down? And they answer with monotonous tones. You know, the real problem isn't race. It's fatherless homes. Why are you people only bothered if the shooter is white? Yeah, I understand your anger. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's life. And statistically, the danger is slight. Now listen, the sliding scales of justice isn't weighing it right. I'm praying for light. And lately, I've been praying for Mike, that his memory won't decay and simply fade in the night. I pray that every injustice gets its day in the light until they understand our struggle. We're stating the plight and taking a stand, jumping, shouting, waving our hands. If they refuse to hear our voice, then we're clanging a pan or spraying the train, shouting to a sprain in the vein, posting a pic. Repeat the message to the hearers are sick, overstated for every soul that don't understand. When you killed Mike Brown, you killed a man. Eric Garner had a family and they valued his life. Trayvon Martin had a future and his future was bright. Oscar Grant's daughter was waiting at the end of the train. Every black life has worth, has a face, has a name.
Man, oh, man. Yeah, so like Clue. Yeah, I feel like one of those old school Funk Flex mixtapes where he'd have people in the studio just drop a verse.
Get it.
Yeah, exactly, man. So I appreciate you dropping a beat for us, and honestly for sharing that information with us, all the time that you spent. Now, brothers and sisters, we got to hear from you. What do you think about colored people justice? And when I ask that, not just the frustration, we all frustrated with it, but what do you think about the reality of colored people justice and the steps that Lee has talked about in terms of us overcoming that system of justice and that disparity in justice? Post that in the Facebook group. You can find that blackswithpower.com/Facebook. I make you go there because I make you apply. I make you apply because this is for us to do our thing. Kind of like Malcolm said to the little white girl when she came to him after his trip to Mecca, that yeah, we love your support, but you can't be on this, right? Because there's some things that we got to talk about, and there's some things that we have to do for ourselves and with ourselves and amongst ourselves, so that we can be our best selves in the terms of making this country into the country that it can be, should be, needs to be. So, brothers and sisters, we want to hear from you. Be sure to like the Facebook page at facebook.com/blackswithpower and subscribe to the show on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play, or TuneIn, or YouTube. Listen to the previous episodes. Give us a thumbs up, a thumbs down. Let us know what you like, what you dislike. Then share your favorite episodes with family, with friends. A charge to keep we have, brothers and sisters. A God to glorify. A never-dying soul to save and fitted for the sky. We have come a long way, and we as a people have indeed accomplished a great deal. But we ain't there yet. So let us march on till victory is won. Live with power.